My J.T. Guenther's honor presentation for Honors 499. Ingracious and Foolish Opinions, Monasteries, and the Popular Voice in Reformation England. So first, just the basic points of my project and what it's kind of going over is, so as any of you who know me might know, is I'm a big history nerd, and what I'm studying here at Wayne State, second year social studies education, as well as a minors in history. And so for our honors project, I was like, why not do a historical research project? And so I decided to choose this, monasteries and how they impacted people and how their dissolution impacted people at about the time of the Reformation. So that's just basically what my project will be going over. Is first just to look at monastic communities in England and how they interacted with the outside world, as well as how the Reformation impacted these communities up to 1537. And that is probably one of the famous monasteries still existing, Westminster Abbey. So first, just a basic overview about monastic communities. Now, my project would take forever if I went over every single monastic community, because in fact, as you can see here, there was 850 separate communities just in England, and they represented 19 different orders. I just have 4 right here. You have the Franciscans, the Benedictines, the Carthusians, the Cistercians, and the Augustinians. But basically, what a monastic community was is you get a group of guys or a group of women, and they were always segregated by sex and gender. You never have a mixed community. It was always just men and just women. And just get a community of them. And the idea was, if they lived apart from the world, they dressed simply, they lived simply, they devoted their time to prayer, to work, to service. They could become close to God, as well as provide good services for their fellow people. And that's basically what every monastic community was. But as you can see, there are so many different variations, and they all lived according to various different rules. That was just of every single one. And they also renounced temporal offices and pleasures. You have your right to marry, have kids, inherit property, and just essentially you became a part of this community for the rest of your life. But the problem is that while these communities want to be a part of the world, it's kind of impossible for them to fully separate from the world. One of the reasons is that, like everything, a monastic community needed money, and a lot of them had land. A few of them had a lot of land, and this being the medieval ages, the way to use that land is in agricultural produce. So a lot of the monks, the nuns, as well as workers they hired out would often work these lands and sell the produce for money. As you can see here, this is just a basic artwork of what a typical monastic community might look like. You got a building up here, and then like your fields and farms and various stuff on the side. And for many noble families of various means, one of the ways to show off your wealth and to also show how much of a religious person you are was to patronize the monastic community. One of my favorite examples is King William the Conqueror founded a monastery famously called Battle Abbey at the site of the Battle of Hastings. And in return, these monastic communities would become essentially pet monasteries for their noble patrons. They would house their coat of arms, they would house their remains once they had died, they would also have the genealogies, and so that was one way. And also for monastic communities, for anybody, no matter what your situation was, if you're like an unwanted kid from a noble family, you were a daughter that didn't want marrying, or if you're just some orphan off the street, you could go to a monastic community, and it was considered a respectable way of turning your life around and living within a monastic community. And also these communities provided free housing and meals to travelers and even nobility who wanted to stay there. In fact, some nobility, including relatives of the royal families, would even spend the rest of their lives there and to become pseudo-monks and nuns as a way to religiously live out the rest of their lives. And also for monastic communities, before the age of schooling, like great colleges here at Wayne State, having a monk or a nun tutor your kid, if you're well off, was one of the few ways to have an education. There are also one of the few places that had manuscripts and scribes that actually were dedicated to copying and preserving scholastic works. And in fact, if you like medieval marginalia, you can thank a bored monk. And this is just some of, I want to say, the most age-appropriate I found. Because believe me, They had some really crazy stuff in there. Again, thanks some Lord Monk for doing this. And another thing about monastic communities is that they often have religious relics. And this is probably one of the most famous of all relics at Glastonbury is the remains, supposed remains, of King Arthur and Queen Guinevere, which you can see at the third visiting. You can also get a sense of just how wealthy certain abbeys could become. But for the poor person of medieval England, the monastic communities had a special importance. For example, for one thing, they were the most tangible connection to their faith outside of an established church. For many of them, were just living outside in a rural community, or if they're in a town or a city, often their abbey, your monastic community, was what they went to for church. In fact, a few ordained monks would become preachers and priests. In fact, for them, they preferred having these guys who are from the area. They spoke the way people spoke. They thought the way these people spoke. They preferred it to having some outsider come in and preach to them. And like I said, they offered relics. And, essentially, it was a ye old tourist trap. It was like, hey, you want to see this ancient king's armor? You want to see this person's remains? You go to a monastery for a small fee. You can view it. You might even be able to rent it and hopefully heal yourself. And indeed, that was this way a lot of people connected to their faith. And this was how it was for hundreds, if not thousands of years, because monastic communities have really been in England since the 5th century CE, when Christianity first came to England. However, about 1,000 years later, things had obviously changed. And monastic communities were kind of going out the vote, at least for the more wealthy people, because a lot of people were like, hey, are these communities really performing the functions that they used to? Do they even have enough people, and are those people living religiously? And they are kind of sitting on a lot of land and wealth. And so already, one of the most surprising things is dissolving monasteries has already been a common, if not widely practiced, thing. One of the most famous examples is Cardinal Wolsey, who was King Henry VIII's minister for the first few years of his reign. He already dissolved a few smaller monasteries to turn them into colleges for young upcoming priests and academics. However, when King Henry famously broke the throne to establish the Anglican Church and made himself supreme head of all of the Church of England, he decided to take steps further, something called the church valuation, or the Valor Ecclesiasticus. Basically what this was a giant report of just the wealth and holdings of all church institutions in England at the time. The Valor has a special purpose in regards to monastic communities. Because again, we want to see out, hey, are these monks and nuns actually living good, holy lives as they're supposed to, and also just how much wealth are they sitting on. So you had commissioners who were often not paid, not even servants, in the sense of like, it wasn't like their office. It was really just whoever was wealthy and connected enough got to be one of the king's commissioners, just go out to the various monasteries around England and see if they were actually living out their creeds. What I found in my research is that the results really varied. You did indeed have some monasteries who were living just as they were supposed to be living. Some of them still had plenty of followers. Other of them weren't even below the minimum number of 12. 12 is considered the minimum number because it was A, the amount of the apostles, and B was also considered the minimum if you wanted to say the hours of prayer, with one monk or none being saying 1 hour of prayer every 12 hours. However, some of them had some very unvirtuous examples. My favorite example, and of course probably one of the most openly obvious, is you had monks, nuns, abbots, abbesses openly living with essentially their spouse and even having illegitimate kids, and nobody thought at the monastery anything of it because that was just how they're doing, and for a long time these communities had been outside the traditional church structure. But again, nobody had any issues with this, at least until they ran into these commissioners. So really what happened is after this Ecclesiasticus was completed in 1536, an act of Parliament authorized King Henry to dissolve any monastery below the required 200 pounds worth. And naturally this got a lot of people really upset because, especially for the common people, the monastery was their connection to their faith. They had seen it for hundreds of years, they were familiar with it, and all of a sudden it was being closed down. A good example is what Dr. Colloquium are now discussing is, imagine if Joe Biden, for whatever reason, decided to close down Wayne State because he felt that it wasn't meeting its requirements. And now just imagine if he started doing this all over Nebraska, and indeed all over the U.S. And so naturally, you had a lot of people and all levels of society really upset. And this culminated in the closing months of 1536 and the early months of 1537 in something called the Pilgrimage of Grace. And basically what the pilgrimage was tens of thousands of really angry people, primarily in the north of England, essentially demonstrating that, hey, we're really upset and we want things to go back the way they were. Now, I sadly didn't have time to include this on my presentation here, but it is talked about more in depth in my paper, is I compared this to a similar movement of about the same time, which was called the Peasants' War in Germany. And what I found was really interesting that the pilgrimage was actually pretty tame by standards of popular revolt. There was very few instances of property destruction, very low, if any, deaths, and really did take on more of a religious movement of just a lot of former monks and nuns, clergy, common peasants, even a few members of the lower nobility demonstrating, as opposed to the Peasants' War, which was, to put it shortly, a bloodbath. But that's not the case in England. But even so, from what research found out, is, well, that. And I think my favorite thing about research is just found a great research thing of notes from King Henry's desk is he was really panicking. It's too bad Twitter wasn't invented, because he was doing a perfect live tweet, because he's just going all day, there's these people, there's more people, why aren't you stopping them? There's even more people, somebody help. And that's essentially what his notes were in his letters to his various members of council were throughout the months of late 1536 and early 1537. But really how this went out was not with a bang or one climatic battle or anything. Really, it was just Henry going, hey, I'll meet with you guys, give me whatever grievances you have, and I will take care of it. They go, okay, talk with people, both decide to leave, and then as soon as everybody's left, King Henry arrests them all, has a lot of people executed, and that's it. Like, this was like the last time anybody really did anything for Catholicism in England, and while there certainly be more popular revolts, this was the last one the Tudors ever had to face. And again, it really just went out with a whimper, not even with a big to-do. And this right here is one of the best remaining examples of a still standing monastery. This is Rivelow in southern Yorkshire. And this is another one, this is Roche in North Yorkshire. And Yorkshire is in the north, where a lot of these very angry peasants came from. Now, there were still more dissolutions that happened after 1537, but 1537 was kind of the watermark. It was the watershed moment. It was like, now all the monasteries, no matter what their size were, all of them got dissolved. And in fact, what I found most surprising is this didn't happen anywhere else in Europe at the time. Like, there were still monasteries that were still allowed to exist, even if greatly diminished. England was really the only country, as you understand it, that really had every single monastery taken down and dissolved. Now, some of them, as you saw with Westminster, did become like churches or cathedrals in the Anglican faith, but many of them were simply only looted by opportunistic people and turned into ruins. Pensions were tried to provide for monks and and nuns, but in some cases it just wasn't enough. And really just you have a lot of people who their way of life is suddenly gone. In my research, I found out that some people did try to start again, some did try to become priests, and some of them even tried to live out their vocations as monks or nuns, but just not as official monks or nuns, just within their families or communities that they set up. And really this was just the end of an era, because the medieval monastery, which has been this foundation for English society for literally 1,000 years, was suddenly gone, and a thing that impacted millions on every level of society was simply gone. And in many cases, a lot of people, even after the event, are like, wow, we really might have gone too far. And really this was just considered like the moment of the English Reformation. It's really the moment that kind of marked like us becoming our own thing. And a lot of writers, no matter what side of the pew, that is, if they're Catholic or Protestant or religious or more secular, just consider this to be one of the moments, but you can certainly find a lot of different interpretations quotations on it. And so this is just some of the readings I did. So especially this Do Solutions of Monastery and King's Reformation, very good, very big books on the subject. Like I think each of them was like over 1,000 pages. Lots of great information, but a lot of information to go over if you are interested in that. And these are some of the books I kind of found out that I read in my own time that really kind of inspired me to do this project in the first place. Reading the first 2 books of the Wolf Hall series, a very good historical fiction series about the time, as well as the Canticle for Lebowitz, which is essentially a science fiction book that centers on a monastery, but it's post-apocalyptic. And the thing is, it kind of goes over a monastery that essentially does all the things I mentioned here, but for essentially just the relics of our modern world. So that was just one, I read that when I was a bit younger, and that was one of my inspirations for the project. Turns out I actually went through a little bit that. Yeah, that's my project. So, does anyone have any questions?
Do you think the English response was less violent because there was something culturally different there going on, or could you say that Henry VIII was just more affected with his violence, sort of cutting the head off the snake, as it were, rather than going against the peasants more broadly, like in the Joffrey Rebellion or the German peasants?
I think what I found was there is a cultural difference, because the English Reformation, what I found, was more top-down. It was more like a lot of noble, educated people deciding, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do, versus specifically the German Peasants' Revolt. What I found out the big thing there is the peasants were not in favor of monasteries. They were very much in line with the Reformation. They thought monasteries were just a waste of time and money. So I came across, in the limited research I did on that, to compare the two, was a lot of monasteries getting looted, abbots people getting killed, versus the English, which is more people like, we want to keep it the way things are. So it's really top down, I say, versus bottom up. So England was very much top down, while at least in Germany was very much bottom up. Again, the difference is the Reformation is in Germany, peasants were for the Reformation. In England, largely indifferent or against it, is what I found. Oh, absolutely.
What about the practice of pilgrimage itself? It was such a pivotal part of medieval life, like the Abbey at Glastonbury. Even after it was dissolved, did pilgrimages continue? Did people go there to see the old wrecked monastery?
Some people did, like just to see, like, hey, this is what it was. But largely, just pilgrimage was something that kind of went out with the Catholic faith, because people considered like these relics, even if they're real, they're fake, why are we keeping them around? Why are we making people come and see them? So we should just get rid of it entirely. But there were still people who did want to come and see, but again, it was very much case by case and just more of an individual thing, and people just largely forgot and wanted to forget about the idea of relics. And in Bring Up the Bodies especially, they have a lot of great quotes on this. My favorite, even though it's fiction, I think it really kind of symbolizes the way some people are thinking, is like the crown of thorns is a tree, it keeps multiplying. Christ's nails keep giving birth to nails. The idea that there's so many fakes going around, and like literally, I could just potentially dig up somebody's bones, say it's the relics of a king or a saint, and have people come and view it and get money. Now, I don't think that happened all the time, but I think it is worth saying that it was a concern, and that was one of the reasons why they wanted to get rid of the whole practice of relics and the whole idea of a monastery profiting off of that in general. Yes?
Did you have, I might phrase this badly, did you have like a favorite part or like anything that you came across that you were like, this is so ridiculous that it's hilarious?
Oh yes, I found that was a great thing about this, both in research and just in books as well as personal notes I found is, for example, one of my favorites is Anne Boleyn, who was Henry's mistress at the time and eventually became the second queen, bugged King Henry while she was still his mistress to make her cousin the abbess of an old nunnery, who the previous abbess had died, her cousin was a nun there, she continually bugged Henry to make her cousin the abbess, even though her cousin was well below the required age and really wasn't very experienced. What I found out is King Henry just had enough of it, and he was like, you know what, no, stop bugging me about this, go away, Anne. And that's what I found out. And there were some other funny stories. One of them I found is there's this very poor abbot who just during the pilgrimage is both sides were like, hey, you should join our side, you should be for the king, or no, you should be with us. He's just like, no, just please just leave me alone and stop damaging my stuff. But my favorite one is, and I included at the beginning of my paper, is some of the king's commissioners go to another abbey, but the monks show up armed with guns and stuff, and they're like, okay, come here, just try and commission us. They're like, are you feeling lucky, punk? And they just go, yeah, I'm not feeling lucky, goodbye. And that was one of my favorites. And also is what I found out during the pilgrimage is that some people on the continent, specifically from the Holy Roman Empire, were like, hey, let's go invade England. Now's the time. Let's go restore Princess Mary. Let's turn England back to the Catholic faith because there's this big revolt. But nothing kind of came of that. So yeah, that's one of my favorite parts is just find all these different, especially Dissolutions was great for this because it is just filled with like these very personal stories of just everyday people and how this affected them. And like I said, it sometimes can be very funny. Anyone? Yes.
I find it fascinating that it was King Henry VIII, because I know in history he's known as like a really controversial kind of ruler. And I was wondering, was he particularly religious?
See, that's one of the things that really surprised me, is that he was religious. In fact, before this, he was considered like the prince in Catholicism. In fact, he even wrote a treatise defending sacraments, and it's from Martin Luther. Before this, I always kind of thought he was taking that in purely cynical terms. Hey, there's all this money. Hey, I really want to get divorced from Catherine, have a male heir, all that kind of stuff. But really what I've kind of found out is, certainly there was more of a cynical side to it. I also can't help but feel at least part of him did really genuinely feel like now is the time to try and reform things and make our own church that wasn't in line with Catholicism, but also really wasn't in line with a lot of the hardcore Reformation stuff. So I feel like at least part of him was very religious. He just wanted to make a new religion that was different from both Martin Luther and the accepted Catholic Church.
It's ironic to me, don't you think?
Yeah.
He's religious, yet he wants to take down all the monasteries that are also being religious.
Yeah, because I guess he just didn't think that monasteries were an accepted thing for religion at the time now.
Mm.
Thank you, JJ. I'm going to give you these cords that you can wear at graduation, symbolizing your honor status. Now you have to keep them for a whole year since you're not graduating.
I will.
Okay. Keep them safe.
I will.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.